This episode brought to you by How to Write Manga, your complete guide to the secrets of Japanese comic book storytelling. Available wherever fine ebooks are sold.
The world has gone insane. Cosplayers rule the conventions. Gamers dominate the tabletop and the internet. Sci-fi subjugates the movies, and fantasy rules the bookstore with an iron fist. Only one group can bring order to this unruly mob. A team of uber geeks, masters of the nerdly arts, trained for decades in the hobby shops and basements of the nation. Mobilized by the secret masters, they are the Department of Nerdly Affairs.
Hello, operatives, and welcome to the Department of Nerdly Affairs. I'm your host, Rob Patterson, here with my co-host, Don Chisholm.
Who's apologizing ahead of time for sounding like Froggy from the Little Rascals.
Don has a frog in his throat, apparently, and a case of telephone voice tonight. And tonight, we have some special guests, Shain and Dave from the MrKitty.org website, the site of all things cool, amazing, fun, and unusual, have decided to come and join us tonight to talk about their amazing site. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thanks.
Glad to be here. That's a really nice introduction, because I don't think it's all that amazing.
Oh, I
pretty
disagree.
amazing.
Pretty amazing?
Okay, fine, it's pretty amazing. But either way, so Shain, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Sure. Well, I studied 2D animation a long time ago. I wouldn't say it's before 3D animation was a thing, but it's getting close. But I graduated from Sheridan College in their 2D animation program. I started drawing comics sometime after college. Haven't worked professionally that often in animation. Right now I write described video scripts for the seeing impaired.
Oh, wow.
And I've held a lot of, I would say, odd jobs over the course of my life.
Okay, cool and interesting jobs from the sounds of it.
Okay, sure.
Well, ones that pay the bills in one form or another anyway.
Oh, sure, yeah. Some of them have been cool and interesting, and some of them have just been, I can't wait to finally cut the cord. But, yeah.
Well, okay. Well, I hope you're not cutting the cord on descriptive video. I mean, those poor blind people, they need your help.
No, I'm always looking for more work for that. I enjoy that.
She can type like a house on fire. She's the fastest typist I've ever seen.
I also transcribed for a living for many years.
Wow, so yeah, you must be super fast. Huh.
Yeah, I'd like to say I'm pretty fast.
I believe it. Wow. Okay.
I think most people are fast these days because everyone communicates via internet. So
Right.
I'm sure there are people who tap on their phones much faster than I could.
Well, I'm a college professor, and I've got to tell you that some of my students, they sit there with their thumbs on their phones, and it's amazing. They can actually take notes at incredible speed.
Yeah, that's I'm amazed because I could never tap with my thumbs that quickly.
Yeah.
I just can't produce anything legible.
Yeah.
It's all gibberish.
Well, you're halfway there.
So how about you, Dave? What's your background?
Well, I'm originally from Atlanta, Georgia. I'm born and raised in Atlanta. Yes, that is where I'm from. I went to Georgia State University. I got a degree in illustration. I helped start Anime Week in Atlanta. I've been a Japanese cartoon nerd all my life. And I helped start Anime Week in Atlanta, which is a convention that's still happening in Atlanta every year.
Is it actually a week long?
It's a weekend.
Weekend, okay.
So it's like Friday, Saturday, Sunday. It's a weekend.
Okay, so
we didn't want to call it a convention, so we called it an Anime Weekend.
It's Thursdays too.
Yeah, it's now actually it's a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
So it eventually will be Anime Week. It's just slowly working its way out.
That will just murder us all. That'll be just a total devastation.
Do you actually still go back for it?
Oh yeah, every year. Yeah.
Oh wow, that's cool.
Yeah, I do an event there and also at Anime North. That's called Anime Hell, which is sort of a crazy clip show.
Right.
And I've been doing that for 20 years, more or less. So that's always a fun thing to do.
Right. Now, did you do that at some of the first Anime North as well, or how long have you been doing it at Anime North?
Well, we moved up to Toronto. Shane had been in Toronto, and we got married, so I moved up to Toronto, and that was 2004. So my first Anime North was 2005, and I've been doing Anime Hell at Anime North since 2005. So this would be the convention's coming up next month, so it'll be 12 years, I guess.
Wow.
So this will be the 12th one. I think.
Yeah,
So.
I've heard of Anime Hell. That's actually pretty famous. That's very cool.
Well, it's a lot of fun. We get a couple of thousand people in there, and I don't get approval for anything I show.
Of course.
I don't get nobody signs off on it. It's just whatever I can find, and people seem to like it. So,
Well, for our audience, what exactly is Anime Hell? Can you describe it?
it's a crazy clip show. It's short animated bits. It's fake commercials. It's movie trailers. It's clips of bad dubbing. It's clips of bad animation. Clips from live action shows, real commercials, you name it, a little bit of everything. Amateur films, some amateur films that I have starred in, I've shown.
Right.
I was a member of a group called Pone Flicks for a while.
I've heard
that
of them, yeah.
fan subtitled anime and also produced their own short. We did a film called Indiana Jones and the Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald.
Oh my
We
God.
did a film called Pong, which was about video games being like drugs, as a 70s
Right.
exploitation cop movie. So it's got a lot of, I got to shoot a lot of people in that. It was a lot of fun.
That's awesome. That's great.
That was fun to shoot.
Wow.
But
so-
I moved up here, and when we moved up here, we decided, well, we need someplace to show off our our comics, because I've been drawing comics pretty much my whole life, and I'm not I don't think I'm that good at it, but I'm enthusiastic about it. So
That's what's important.
I have a lot of fun doing it.
We're both enthusiastic artists.
Enthusiastic amateurs. Well, I wouldn't say that.
You wouldn't say we're enthusiastic or we're
Amateurs. I wouldn't say, you get paid for it every once in a while.
Once in a while.
I got 350.
Yeah.
Somebody sent me 350 over Twitter because they like my my Don Rickles sketch.
Which
Because
is
Don
highly
Rickles
topical.
just passed.
Yeah.
Yeah, he just passed away, right? So
Yeah.
we're actually kind of broken up about that because he was a giant.
Yep.
I was actually really I was sad because he was my favorite comedian ever since I was a little kid, but also I'd kind of harbored a dream of meeting him, like going to one of his shows and getting his autograph on the Superman comic.
The Jimmy Olsen, yeah.
Oh, the
yeah,
Jimmy
yeah.
Olsen.
Yeah, that one, that would have been perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, I would have loved to have gotten his autograph.
The look
that.
on his face
Yeah.
would have been priceless.
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, one of Don's friends actually did meet him. He works as Don's friend works as a security guard doing at the casino in Windsor. And
yeah.
he'd actually escorted Don Rickles when Don had come up to do shows at Windsor.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, I think the last time
we had considered going to one of
he
them.
was at Casino Rama, which is up in Barrie, Aurelia.
Right.
The Aurelia Casino. And that was just a little too far, I think. It was like a crappy time of the year, and
You'd have to stay overnight.
you basically have to, get a room, stay overnight, because there is, I'm not driving that in the middle of the night.
Well, you could have hopped one of those buses with all those seniors they constantly take up there.
That's right. That's right.
Oh, yeah.
That's why they have that. Yeah. That's
All right. So Mr. Kitty is basically your giant collection of stuff that you guys think is cool and interesting. Then.
I think so.
Yeah, it's got a lot of our stuff. Got comics. It's got other sort of things on it.
I think we had started doing stupid comics because I had an issue of a comic my friend Grant Goggins turned me onto in Athens, Georgia, called Guardians of Justice and the O-Force.
Oh,
And he found it in a dollar bin or a 25-cent bin. He's like, Dave, you have to have this. So we sort of were buying terrible comics out of the cheapy bins. And every time people would come over, we would say, hey, check out this terrible comic.
Right.
And after a while, you can't invite everybody in the world into your living room.
It's a little annoying. I used to do this even when I was in high school. If I'd find something stupid or funny in a comic book, I'd show it to my friends, and I'd be laughing and trying to explain to them why it was funny, and I think they just found it annoying.
Right.
And I was constantly showing them these. I'm sure they probably had no idea why it was funny anyway. You kind of have to put it out there, lay it out.
Context is key.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely. And so that's the genesis then of Stupid Comics, I guess. You just kind of started taking clips from those comics, putting them up with your own commentary.
And we're not the first people to do that on the internet. Super Dickory had been doing that.
Yeah, Sean Baby actually called his site Stupid Comics.
Yeah, so
which, in retrospect, we probably should have found another name. Sorry, Sean Baby.
Scott Shaw had been doing that
as he
for a while. So he pointed out to us.
Yeah, he pointed out
in a highly irritated tone of voice, or at least a
tone of rating.
Series of really irritated messages on an internet forum once.
Comic book resources.
Yeah, way back.
Yep.
Never have heroes, kids. Never have heroes.
He wasn't exactly a hero.
No. But a lot, we're not the only people.
I've given away my Captain Carrot and the Zoo Crew comics. So.
What I'm trying to say is that
those are collector's items.
They probably are worth something now, yeah. But I was at the point where I had a lot of stuff, and this was long before I was, doing a website, and I was just giving away a bunch of my comics, and I was like, I don't want people seeing this and thinking I'm a furry. So I should just get rid of them. And it's dumb because I still have all my Omaha the Cat Dancer comics. So that's way furrier.
Yeah, but nobody shows those in public. No one admits to having those in public usually.
You'd think that's true, but I remember bringing the first issue, the Bizarre Sex #9 that ran the first story. I remember bringing that to high school, showing my friends.
High school?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That would have gotten me in a lot of trouble.
Well, I would have if I did.
Right.
My teachers didn't pay any attention.
Yeah, that's good.
Well, okay, that's good. Obviously, it wasn't a Catholic high school.
No. It was just a regular public school, underfunded, and overcrowded.
Yep.
That's kind of ironic because I remember that was where I first read the Bizarre Sex with Omaha in it, and I went to a Catholic high school. So the thing that stuck with me out of that one is, if you remember the issue, there's I think it's a Howard Cruz story that I don't want to get into the specifics, but where he explains that Stan Lee has the whitest teeth in the comic industry.
Oh yeah, I forgot. It's like a backup story.
Yeah, because it was an anthology.
Oh, okay. The Bizarre Sex, the one I'm thinking of. I remember it just being one long Omaha story.
Oh, that was the second one.
I think Omaha did take over the comic. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's the one I had.
Well, that sold like a house on fire for Kitchen Sink, man.
Oh yeah.
That made Dennis Kitchen so much money.
You can't go wrong with furry porn.
Well, that was I think the comic that started that.
I think it did.
It certainly perfected it. I don't think it's ever. They've never quite gotten past that pinnacle.
Well, wasn't Crumb already doing what amounted to furry porn already in his stuff?
Yeah, but he wasn't he wasn't taking it seriously.
Okay.
Omaha the Cat Dancer is this enormous soap opera. And Robert Crumb would have, in fact, I believe I have an issue of Weirdo where Robert Crumb makes fun of Omaha the Cat Dancer.
Really?
And it's called Wichita the Rat Dancer. And it turns into this soap opera parody with just people babbling about their stock options and their restaurants they're opening and blah 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 blah.
Well, that's the later Omaha. The original Omaha and Bizarre Sex was it wasn't completely porn, but there was a lot society. It was it was never Robert Crumb like though, because Robert Crumb was always trying to make some sort of point about society or something with Fritz the Cat.
Butts.
And butts.
Lots of
Reed Waller was more of a breast man.
He was I think his females were more of an idealized, a standard beautiful woman, whereas Crumb is like, oh no, this is what I like specifically. This is me personally here, guys.
Yeah, everyone knows what Robert Crumb likes. There's no gray area there.
Well, speaking of people who can draw like a house on fire, but who you wouldn't necessarily want to spend a weekend with.
I wouldn't. No.
Really?
I wouldn't want to
be
spend.
tempted.
I'd like to hang out with Eileen Crumb.
Yeah,
But she's crazy.
Yeah. Oh yeah, she'd be fun.
I have to go to France. Let's go to France.
I think
So
she'd
that's
scare
not-
me more.
Oh yeah, definitely a frightening woman.
Hmm. Well, because it's the idea, like Crumb, you kind of know where you stand, but you think, who would be involved with this guy voluntarily?
Yeah, well, I'm sure they have an understanding. I'm
I
sure
think
she
they
understands.
do. Yeah, well, she knows she can make him toe the line.
Yeah.
Yes, I could definitely see that. So let's hear a little bit more about, or talk a little bit more about your version of stupid comics. So what is then? I guess the obvious question is: so what is the most classic stupid comic? What's the one you've gotten the most feedback for?
Oh,
Yeah, what would be the most feedback?
Probably Fletcher Hanks. Yeah.
Yeah,
sure.
definitely.
Sure.
Fletcher Hanks, Stardust, the Super Wizard, and Phantoma, the Mystery Woman of the Jungle.
Right.
The Fantagram. I'm sure you're familiar with Fletcher Hanks. He's this alcoholic, wife-beating,
He's a golden age.
thoroughly nasty human being.
Right.
And I had bought. I'd been aware of this artist. There's a comic store in Athens called Bizarro Wuxtry, actually run by a friend of mine. It's the best comic book store certainly in Georgia and probably the South and possibly the United States. Anyway, he's like, Dave, here's this awesome character. You have to look at these comics. I picked up an issue of Fantastic Comics with Stardust in it at a sale. And this is a comic from 1940, and I think I paid $5 for it. So I'm like, oh yeah, that's cheap, And it has this insane. I believe Raw had featured one of his stories. So Art Spiegelman was definitely aware of this weird sort of backwoods primitive.
It's like folk art.
Very much so.
Outsider art.
A lot of power to it.
Right.
Yeah.
A lot of power to it.
The artwork isn't good per se, but it gets the point across.
So we took there's a Phantoma story in that Fantastic Comics, I think, and there's also a Stardust story.
Didn't my father's comics?
So Shane's dad collected comics, and he had this enormous collection of 1940s comics.
He collected exclusively Golden Age. Yeah.
That he had grown up reading.
Yeah. It was just the comics that he read as a kid, and he, as many people do, wanted to go back and recollect them all.
So we have this resource of 1940s Golden Age comics, and I think there is a Fletcher Hanks in one of those, because he was a Fiction House. He worked for Fiction House, which did Sheena, Queen of the Jungle.
Right.
So if you have Jumbo Comics, I believe Sheena was in.
Jumbo.
So there's some Fletcher Hanks happening in there too. But the Phantoma was the first Fletcher Hanks story we did, and that got a lot of feedback. People like, oh my God, this guy's head just got ripped off. Why is her face a skull now? The gorillas are all the same gorilla drawn over and over and over and over again.
It's very dreamlike.
It's very dreamlike. So we've gotten a lot of feedback from that.
Yeah.
And then Karasik published 2 books of Fletcher Hanks comics. Fantagraphics just published those.
Well, it was like 10 years ago.
I know.
But there was a kind of a lot of internet talk about Fletcher Hanks around the time the books came out. So
what's great is that we see the scans we made of those comics pop up all over the internet. You can see, oh, I scanned that panel in. Oh, I scanned that panel in. And you feel proprietary about it. But at the same time, like, we didn't draw it. We didn't print it. We just found it somewhere and put it on the internet so people could make fun of it.
Right. That's awesome.
But we do own it.
We do own that. Yeah, that's the rule we have about Stupid Comics. We physically own all those comics. These aren't scans people made and sent us. We didn't download these comics. These are all physical. We own physical copies of these comics.
Right. Now, do people, though, send you actual comic
people
books?
have sent us actual comics, yeah.
Oh, God. The worst... someone sent us The Adventures of Ford Fairlane comics, which is, I don't know if you remember this comedy that Andrew Dice Clay starred in back in the 90s. Yeah. As, most of us have tried to forget, but... so we get the comic and we, make fun of it and put it on Stupid Comics. And I think it was on the floor for some
We
reason.
left it lying around because we were like, it was the summer, we were busy. I think we were out of town.
Yeah, and we just left it for whatever reason, and it was fine. But at some point, we're like, oh, we should put this somewhere. We pick it up, and it is crawling with little white maggots.
Ugh.
It was the most horrifying, and we don't have those here. This is a new
It is a
building.
horror movie.
It was like The Exorcist. It was absolutely horrifying. It was, and they were only in the comic, nowhere else.
Only Ford Fairlane.
Never seen them before or since.
what
They
the
sought
hell?
out their own.
Like seats. That's not really, because I had to do a Woody Allen movie recently for work, and he was in it, and he was actually really good. So
Yeah, Dice Clay is.
to be fair, he's a good actor. He can act.
I think he took this character and took it too far
He
and
wrote it all the way.
internalized it and let it ruin his career for a while.
I think he just didn't realize that the joke would get old.
Yeah.
Probably.
So yeah, maggots over the Ford Fairlane
Yeah,
comic.
that was terrifying.
Mother Nature itself commenting upon how terrible. And it was a really lousy comic.
Yeah, it was.
There's a
It was
character.
DC, too.
Yeah, it was a DC comic, so it should have had some kind of quality to it. But I believe there's a character in it that was supposed to be like they changed his race. Like he was supposed to be a black character, and they turned him white.
Oh.
Okay.
Vice versa, or something like that. Like they were trying to make him Andrew Dice. They were trying to make him.
Was he like Prince?
No. He had a talk show.
Oh,
Help me out
Arsenio
here.
Hall?
Arsenio Hall. Yes.
Oh, okay.
It was like a thinly disguised Arsenio Hall, and I think legal department was like, "Oh, we better change this," So,
Right.
but yeah, I think that was, we've got comics from I think every publisher is represented.
I think so. Yeah.
Like we've Harvey. I don't believe we've got any EC comics in there.
No, I
Haven't
can't
made
imagine
fun of
trying
any
to make.
EC
We
comics.
probably could, but the thing is, one of our other rules is no reprints unless they're vintage reprints. Like we put up some comics that were reprints of 50s comics, but they were reprinted in the 70s. Like I've owned them since I was a kid,
Okay.
I think that counts.
which
Yeah.
I think is legitimate. But if it's like, because I have like a big collection, a big hardback collection of post horror, like after the post code of EC comics, they had to stop all their horror and suspense
Oh
comics.
yeah, like psychoanalyst.
Psychoanalysis, which is about people getting psychoanalyzed. And
Okay.
it would probably be funny to do as a stupid comics just because it's so weird. But it's, it's a hardback reprint.
I feel like
so
kicking
that's
those guys when they're down.
Well, they're all dead now. They don't care.
That was William Gaines going to his analyst. He's like, I can make a comic out of this.
Yeah. Well, and I admire the fact that they were trying to do more adult. Like, it wasn't just this dumb genre sort of thing. They were trying to do, tell adult stories and
This is
raise the bar a little bit.
whenever you talk
But nobody
about
wants to read
no,
psychoanalysis
no.
comics.
Whenever you talk about old comics, someone's always going to talk about the comics code and how terrible the comics code was, for American comics, and how it crippled the sales or whatever. But when you look at the sales figures for comics, they actually increased as the code was being introduced. And even post-comics code, you still had romance comics, you had kids comics, you had westerns, you had crime comics. Well, you couldn't call them crime comics. You still had mystery comics.
Space
You
comics.
could have space comics.
Yeah.
They had this enormous, like every kind of genre of comics were appearing in the United States. And it was really not until the 60s when they sort of went exclusively superheroes that sales started to decline.
Yeah.
But was that really the cause though? I mean, things were changing, of course. We had movies at that, television at that point, and there was more
one of the
competition.
things, and this affected Mad Magazine as well, is a major distributor went bankrupt in the mid '50s, and suddenly, instead of having, you had this entire outlet for the sales of comic books, that was just gone.
Right. Yeah. That's true.
And it almost sunk Mad Magazine, and they managed to come back from it. And it sunk a lot of publishers. It almost sank Marvel Comics at that point. They wound up having to go with National's distributor, and National would only say, "Fine, we'll give you 12 slots a month. That's it."
Yeah, distribution has always been a problem.
That's why when you see the early days of Marvel Comics, they had a set amount of comics, And if they wanted a new comic, they had to cancel an old comic.
Yeah.
I see. That makes sense. I never knew about that.
There's an interesting the business aspect, and I mean, that's what I do for work. Is I'm in the printing industry, and when you think about comics, it's like the American comic book is or was a delivery system for ads for sea monkeys and bicycles and Daisy BB guns.
Right.
Content was ancillary. What you want is to sell these ads and get these ads in the hands of 12-year-olds.
Mm-hmm.
And oh, well, I guess we'll have some superheroes in here or whatever,
Right.
That's all gone away, right? You don't have kids, you don't have the spinner racks in the drugstores.
Well, you only have one distributor.
You only have one distributor now, yeah. I mean, how that's legal, I don't even know.
Yeah.
I mean, that's restraint of trade as far as I'm concerned. But you only have one distributor. You can't buy them in the books, candy stores. You can't buy them in the drug stores.
Except Archie.
Yeah, well, you can buy Archie because Archie said, we don't need the comics. Well, no, they didn't say that. Though the comics code, where I was going with this, was that the comics code was the brainchild of Richard Goldwater, Mr. Archie Comics, who says, I'm going to put EC Comics out of business.
Yeah.
And that's what he did. And so, I love Archie Comics, but holy cow, those people are terrible, inhuman monsters. I mean, seriously, like what did they do to Dan DeCarlo, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No,
I mean, they hung him out to dry. Who?
Yeah. Well, I mean that because of the when you think about how they took him out of all of their history.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly.
Because you guys did the one comic where Betty makes an actual reference to him as their artist.
My favorite artist is Dan DeCarlo, and then they reprinted that. And they're like, "Oh, my favorite artist is the Archie Comics artist who shall remain nameless."
Yeah.
Oh, you just want to go down to Mamaroneck, New York, or wherever they are, and just.
Well, they do change things in their reprint, like
They do. They change things all the time.
Archie wearing a Beatle wig and saying, "I'm a punk rocker."
Right.
That's the best. You're just like, what? Archie got hit on the head. And he's got that stupid expression on his face, too.
Have we put
it's been up. I think it's been up. I don't think I posted it on Twitter, but I don't believe
right.
I've actually used it.
Yeah, I don't think we've had it on Stupid Comics.
Oh, man. Well, and I only have that in the digest, so I need to get the original where he says Beetle Wig.
Yeah, we don't, that's the, because it's a reprint, so we don't generally use digest, even though there's some really good stories in the digest.
I try to use, if I have to, I'll go to a digest, because I have a lot of Archie digests, which is pretty sad.
I think that's something of a Canadian tradition, isn't it? Almost everyone I know has a huge pile of Archie digests somewhere.
I feel like it is. I feel like, when I moved up here, I was interested to find out how powerful Archie Comics was, at least in Ontario.
Yeah.
That it's just a really a
super
part.
pop.
Yeah.
In fact, I started reading them. Like, I read them as a kid, obviously, and I read them growing up, but I stayed with my aunt and uncle after college for like a month. And my cousin, who was like a little girl at the time, she had tons of them lying around their house. And I was just like, started reading this, like, I love this artwork. Like, I started trying to emulate the I don't want to say simplicity, but the sort of aesthetic in those comics. I tried to emulate in my own comics because I like them so much.
It's very clean and direct. It's like I don't really see a lot of people able to pull that off. It's like A, B, C, D. Get it done. It's storytelling pared down to its essentials. And I think if you look at like pick up any like adventure superhero type comic on the racks today, take out all the word balloons, you can't tell what's going on.
Yeah.
It's nicely illustrated, but there's no storytelling there.
Of course, now that Archie uses different art styles now.
Yeah, Archie is, the great thing about buying Archie comics these days, like we'll go to a show or a store and we'll say, yeah, we're looking for Archie comics. And immediately the first thing they say is, did you know Archie is like a zombie now?
Right.
Did you know Archie and the Walking Dead? That's a thing now. And
if I cared about zombies, that would be really interesting to me.
And it's fascinating how savvy the marketing department of Archie Comics is.
Yeah.
Because they are like, no, we're going to do this. We're going to have Archie meet the Punisher. We're going to have him do this. We're going to have him do that.
Archie versus Predator. They've
exactly,
done that.
Exactly.
Yep.
When you consider how long they've managed to stay on the newsstands and just how long they've been around in general, I mean, they have some skeevy business practices that we've already mentioned, but I mean,
Cutthroat.
it's done them, it's obviously helped because they're still around when many others have fallen by the wayside. And it's not a superhero line, which is doubly.
As much as they keep trying to drag those terrible superhero characters.
Ooh, Pure Heart the Powerful.
Yeah.
No, I'm thinking about like the Jaguar, and, Steel Sterling, and the Fly, and the Hood.
Right. Yep.
The Hangman, whatever his name is.
They tried to bring those back for the Image Age back in the 90s. I remember they tried to do their version of Image Comics using them. Oh,
yeah.
Those are really terrible comics. You know, we really haven't covered the Image era of comics.
We don't own very many.
We don't own a lot of those. We've got a few.
We have some 90s comics.
Yeah.
I've got a pile. I've got a box full of like potential stupid comics that I pull through every week.
I bet that's a pretty big box.
It's like a magazine box, and then there's more on like sort of stacked on top of it. So it's more than a magazine
It's a good
box.
size stack. It's
Right.
Yeah.
And so do you put up new stupid comics every week then?
Every week. It's generally up Thursday afternoons,
Thursday
evenings,
afternoon, evening.
and we'll take a couple of weeks off in the summer, and we'll take a couple of weeks off at Christmas. But generally, it's, I don't know, 48 a year, 47 a year. We're at number 527.
I think so.
I think this week's was 527. Or maybe.
Wow.
So that's a lot of stupid, that's a lot of stupid comics.
Yeah, that's a lot of stupid comics.
Kinda
But
depressing.
do you ever get tired of doing it, or is it just something that's endlessly entertaining?
Well, I feel like as long as we keep finding the terrible comics.
Yeah, I wouldn't force it. Like if we honestly didn't, like if we somehow ran to the end of stupid comics and we couldn't find a single other comic to make fun of,
We would start back over from the beginning.
well, actually we could, because there were a lot that we did at the beginning that I don't think we gave full attention to. Like a lot of the early ones I did were like potpourri and samplers.
I think it took us a while
out of
to
context panel.
find our voice.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. Well,
In
it
terms
happens with
of-
everyone.
Because we've seen some of the other sites that make fun of comics. They're generally like, they'll give you the issue number and the title and who worked on it, and like all this statistical data. And we're not so much. We're like, if we're going to show this and talk about it, it's got to be funny. If it's
Right.
not funny, we are not going to talk about it. And it's been hard to sort of halt that impulse to obsessive compulsive list everything. It's like no, just the jokes, please.
Just the jokes, okay. Well, there's a question then. So what makes something good or bad? Like in your opinion, what makes for a bad comic or a good bad comic, I guess, and the ones that are funny anyway?
Yeah, I mean, it's good to point out that they're not all necessarily bad, and some are certainly better than others, but they have to be incompetent in some way or baffling. Why was this made?
I think anytime there is like a typo or like a really serious editorial error that someone was getting paid to make sure this didn't happen and they let it through.
And we only, like, we're not going to do like someone's fanzine or their home stapled photocopied
We've
comics.
come close.
We have come pretty close though, yes. But if it's something that people have invested their money in.
Yeah, I feel like if it's sold on a newsstand, we have the right to make fun of it.
Yeah,
Right.
if it has an ISBN, or if it's recent enough.
And I mean, this is like we came through the 80s, and we came through that big black and white boom in the 80s, and we saw a lot of people seeing dollar signs in their eyes, like, I can come out with this fake rip-off Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and make $1 million and trying to cash it in. And I feel those people are fair game.
Yeah.
Because they knew what they were getting.
They got greedy.
They got greedy, and they produced terrible comics. Some of them are just incomprehensible. Some of them are, I don't want to... We have a lot of these black and white comics. Yeah.
It's something like Skate Man, I would call ill-conceived.
Skate Man.
And it's someone who should know better, who apparently doesn't. Neil Adams.
It was
right?
Neil Adams.
Yeah, and
he should totally have known better.
And thinking that a superhero on roller skates, and it's not even okay. That's a dumb idea to begin with.
I call it Skaterade.
But it's like, okay, whatever. It's a superhero skates, whatever. And it's just, it's dumb. Just beyond that, the execution is dumb.
Right.
It doesn't make any sense. And isn't there there's like a black and white comic we have that's also superheroes on roller skates, isn't there?
Yeah. We did that a little while ago.
Yeah, and that's not very good.
Which
either.
was like a tie-in to another superhero.
Right.
You know what I love about the sort of the independent superhero comics is this entire generation, more than one generation of artists who are convinced that the only way to do comics is by muscular people in tight outfits beating people up.
Well, I think it's because everyone's got their own superhero universe that they want to share with the world.
Yeah.
And I have some news for these people who have their very own superhero universe, and I hate to be the one to say this, but probably no one wants to read about your original superhero universe.
Nobody cares.
We're full up with superhero
We're
universes.
good. Thank you. We are still using characters created in the 30s.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't run out of those characters. We're still burning through those characters.
And Marvel and DC seem to have no end of mining the depths of obscure heroes that they have.
Mm-hmm. It's true. And then they keep here's another Batman movie coming down the pike, you know?
Yeah. I just hope that they cover his origin next time, because I don't know how he started becoming.
How exactly did Batman become Batman? Because I've only seen that in movies like 8 times.
Every Batman movie?
You know, the most successful iteration of Batman, the 1966 Batman television series,
never explains it.
Never bothered with that.
I don't think he ever mentions his parents.
They didn't care. It's not important. We don't care.
God. You're right. I'm
right, aren't I?
Yeah, you are. They never explained who Batman was. They're just like, he's this rich guy who puts on a bat suit and
Batman. What more do you need, man? Batman.
Why is he Batman? Why wouldn't he be Batman?
Wouldn't you be Batman? That's why. I might point out too that back in the '60s, when Supergirl was hanging out with Comet the Super Horse, who is actually a hunky dude.
He's a centaur.
He's a centaur who's hunky. When Beppo the super monkey was doing stuff, and the Legion of Super Pets was roaming, those comics sold in the millions, with an M, the millions.
Jesus.
Yeah.
And these days, there ain't nothing selling in the millions.
Well, and again, there's many factors playing.
There's many
that.
factors.
It was like the distribution.
The number one factor is that these comics were stupid, and they were made for.
They were fun to read, and they were made for children.
Fun to read. They were made for children, and they sold like hotcakes.
Yep.
And these days, comic books are pompous and overbearing, and they're made for Arrested Development grown-ups, and they sell in the thousands.
Yeah. Do
the math.
Because I gotta say, one of the things I don't know how you guys feel, but I remember the 80s. You had the black and white boom, and then when that died off, and you had the comic shops, Marvel and DC moved in, and you had a big superhero boom. And I remember by the mid 80s, this is why I kind of think it's me laughing at other people's misfortune. But I remember in those days, Archie wasn't even considered a comic book by the comic book press.
Yeah.
Right.
And and nowadays you look, those little the little Archie digest, I think they have print runs of 175,000.
Some of those do really well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because a Marvel book will have a print run nowadays. I think it's 85,000.
Yeah, that would be great. Those are great numbers for a Marvel comic these days.
If they could get close to 100,000, then
It is amazing to go into a comic book store and you go up to the register with some beat up Betty and Veronica from 1967, and the look they give you, they're like, "Are you really buying this?" Well, it's like when we were in some antique mall buying a Monkees record, and the grandma behind the counter is like, "Are you buying this for the music or just to make fun of it?" We're like,
really?
It's the Monkees, lady.
Why
Jeez.
would you? Of all the things to make fun of, the Monkees is not one of them.
Yeah, man, they were some real talent.
No,
the
man.
Monkees. I'm not going to hear a word against the Monkees.
And we did.
Yeah, we did. We
We
several times we hear words against the
And
Monkees.
Antique Mall isn't open anymore, so.
That's true.
Now, did you guys also do Found Sound? You also
We
did
did.
some audio work as well?
We used to do for how many years did we do that?
It was a few years. It was at least 5. I'm
Yeah, at
pretty
least
sure.
5 or 6 years.
A good long time.
And it would just be like, here's some crazy songs off of dig some stuff out of our record collection. And
It was really similar to Stupid Comics in that we had all this funny stuff that we wanted to share.
novelty records and themes from obscure Japanese cartoons and things like that. And that was actually that became kind of a hassle, so we quit doing it.
Oh, okay. Is it still up? Can people still find that, or did you just take it down?
We took it down. We actually, because I wasn't sure about the legal ramifications of having audio files like songs. We would take it down. Like whenever we put
leave
a
it
new
up
one
for a
up,
week,
we
yeah.
leave it up, and then we take it down for the new one.
Swap it out for
following
next
week.
one.
So yeah, there's no lasting record of Found Sound, unfortunately. But
well, what we're doing now is we're doing a series of podcasts.
Right.
And
awesome.
Our goal is to use the podcast. Theoretically, we were saying it was going to be 4 times a year, and it's working out to be about twice a year.
Yeah, if that.
And we're going to play a lot of the music that we used to do on Found Sound. And instead of it being 2 songs a week, it's going to be 18 songs every couple of months, And we've done 4, how many podcasts? 3 podcasts so far?
Oh, 2 or 3.
2 or 3. We did one with crazy superhero music, and we did one with video game type music.
Oh, yeah.
And we actually recorded some songs about video games and, like sort of 80s, 70s and 80s era video games.
Right, yes.
And recorded some audio in a great arcade in New Hampshire called the Fun Spot.
That's great.
We interviewed some people talking about... We interviewed Shain playing Moon Patrol, which is her favorite video game.
Yes, Moon Patrol was awesome. I blew many quarters on that back in the day.
Yeah, me too. I
remember Moon Patrol.
Galaga.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Galaga, of course. Yep.
Happy.
So what's your what's the podcast called then for people that are looking for it?
Oh, it's called Mr. Kitty's Lo-Fi Landfill.
Mr. Kitty's Lo-Fi Landfill.
It's a lo-fi landfill, and it reflects the state of our audio recording equipment.
Okay.
In our turntable, which is not the greatest turntable. It's, I needed to get a new needle for that thing.
Yeah.
Actually, I think. Anyway, right now, I put the first show is up on YouTube with some video attached to it, and there's some Archie songs and, the Hardy Boys and cartoon music, stuff like that. And the third one is up. You can access it through Mr. Kitty. I don't believe we don't have we're not listed on iTunes or anything like that.
No.
So
okay.
It's just on the website.
I guess we need to do that.
Yeah, I just haven't had time to look into that.
We've been busy. We got day jobs, It's like we can't spend all day doing this.
Yeah, and up until recently, I was doing a weekly webcomic, and that took so much of my free time that I had little time for anything else.
It's a lot of.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
I guess that's a good segue.
Yeah, it probably is a good segue to your original comics. So what comics do you guys do then, or what web comics have you been doing, Shain?
Well, the one I just finished was called The Element of Surprise, and it was sort of a gay-themed romance, crime drama kind of story. And that had 3 volumes, if you're into that sort of thing. And like I said, I just finished that. And I also... I have been doing, and I discontinued it for a while, but I want to pick it up again, another one called Georgie Girls, which is sort of making fun of fandom and pointing out the little foibles of the nerd set. Mostly just quoting people off Twitter directly.
Right.
I've only been the inspiration for 2 of those.
Right.
Maybe more than 2.
I'm not sure. I would have to check my records.
Right. Okay. And how about you, Dave? What webcomics have you been doing?
Well, when we first started Mr. Kitty, I was trying to finish a sort of a traditional comic I was doing called The Ozone Commandos Go to Hell.
Okay.
Which, this dates from the 80s, and it was a fan comic that I was doing about me and my friends, some of whom cosplayed, even though we didn't call it cosplaying back then, cosplayed as Japanese cartoon characters. So the story was, we're in some crazy future battling an evil totalitarian government flying around in a giant space blimp.
That's reasonable. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And referencing Japanese cartoons like crazy because it's a fan nerd comic.
Of course.
So I started to do The Ozone Commandos Go to Hell. Actually, there's a live-action movie based on The Ozone Commandos that I'm in that we shot the first part of. And I don't believe Matt's ever going to finish the second part because we're all 50.
It was 20 years ago.
It was 20 years ago.
Yeah.
But it's up on the Cornpone Flicks website, cornponeflix.org. And I highly recommend you watch it because it's...
Is that website still up?
Yeah, it's still up.
Okay.
Still up. Got saved last minute. Still up. Anyway, it's got a giant robot Jesus in it, but we'll get to that later.
Okay.
So I was in the middle of doing this 100-page Ocean Commandos Go to Hell, and I'm like, well, I got to finish this thing. So I'll put it up on MrKitty.org, and that'll give me impetus to finish this comic, to finally finish it. So, like, was I putting up a page a week?
Something like that.
Something like that, you know. And it gave me, like, knowing that it had to go up and there was going to be at least some sort of audience looking at these pages, and I could say, hey, here's the page. That sort of gave me momentum to finish it. So I finished that. I did a comic called Jesus Christ Conquers the Martians, which was kind of a clip art kind of strip, which is about Jesus Christ conquering the Martians. And the characters are all traced characters from various Leiji Matsumoto manga and anime. So there are Vanguard Ace characters in there, Captain Harlock characters in there. Mostly it's those two, Vanguard Ace and Harlock. Anyway, and
Vanguard Ace and Captain Harlock are awesome, so of course.
Vanguard Ace does not get the love I think it needs, because it's a really weird show.
It was an odd show, but it was actually pretty nifty. I mean, it was unique. Back when I was a kid, I had a tape of the first couple episodes, and I watched it over and over again. And the thing that shocked me was it took forever before Vanguard Ace even appears in the series.
Right? He doesn't show up in the manga. The manga for Vanguard Ace, the robot Vanguard Ace shows up on the last page.
You're kidding.
No kidding. Because the story is really like the robot is Anseli. It's really like they discovered this 13th planet or whatever, and there's a race between two governments trying to get to that planet first. And the animation has, who's that character design that worked on Rose of Versailles? Shingo Araki.
Oh, yeah.
Araki. Yeah. It's got Shingo Araki character designs, which are just fantastic. It's got, like, the bad guys, this dreamy blonde guy. There's a couple of space goddesses in there they throw in there. It really actually looks really good, because I like the way Shingo Araki looks on the Matsumoto characters. And he worked on Eternal Orbit SSX too, which is coming out on DVD from Discotek later this year, I think.
Yes, I heard that. That'll be awesome.
Really excited about that. That's going to have the pilot film on it too, which I've never seen in my life. So
wow, obviously you're a big old school anime fan.
I'm a big old school.
So what's your favorite old school anime then, besides obviously Vanguard Ace?
I'd have to say Space Battleship Yamato.
Yeah.
I think Star Blazers is Star Blazers is really, like, I saw this show called Prince Planet when I was really small, and it turned me into an anime nerd for life. And I saw Speed Racer like everyone else.
Yeah, everyone saw Speed Racer, but that's not going to convert anyone.
No. But when I was 10...
Maybe just smoking.
Yeah, well, sure, When I was 10, actually it'd be Eighth Man that would make you smoke. Because Eighth Man got his energy through cigarettes, right?
Yes, he did. Yeah, he did.
Like all Japanese
men, he gets his energy through cigarettes. You want to hear the story about the guy who sang the Japanese Eighth Man theme song?
Sure.
You know what he did? He killed his girlfriend. He killed his girlfriend, put her in the trunk of his car, and drove around Tokyo for a week until they caught him. And that's why you couldn't buy the theme song to Eighth Man for years and years and years.
Nobody wants to hear it.
Because nobody wanted to hear it. Yeah, it's totally for real.
Okay, then.
There you go.
That's
my Eighth Man. I can't even think of the singer's name.
No, that's just
you don't need to. It's okay. That's bizarre.
Anyway, so when I was in elementary school, Star Blazers came on TV, and I was like, I came home, I went to school on Tuesday, and everybody's like, oh, you have to watch this show about this. It's this battleship in space. It's so awesome. It's like Star Wars. And I'm like, how good can this be? Really?
Right.
And I went, home the next day, and I watched it. I'm like, oh, my God, this is the greatest thing in my life. And for the rest of my life, I've been like, well, I got to find out more about this show.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
I can see that. Yeah. So how about you, Shane? Are you also an anime fan?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Actually, Star Blazers was also my gateway anime. I watched, I watched Battle of the Planets and Speed Racer before that, obviously. And I really liked them, but, they're pretty dumb. I don't think I was going to become fanatical over that. But, yeah, I watched Star Blazers, and I can guarantee you I was the only person in my school watching Star Blazers, because I am slightly older than Dave. I believe I was in ninth grade at the time. People, yeah.
Ninth grade is not a good time to tell people.
I wasn't going to come running into the schoolhouse. Yay! And I probably did, though, because I'm pretty sure, again, I think my friends found me pretty annoying.
Talking about cartoons in the ninth grade is not a good way.
Yeah, it's amazing I had friends, actually.
But you were wandering around with copies of porn comics. Apparently, that was okay.
Yeah, actually, that works.
I believe that.
Definitely made friends showing pornography to teenage boys.
When you show up in high school with some manga that may be a little more adult than what Americans are used to, suddenly like, oh, well, I see why now the appeal of these crazy Asian cartoons.
Right. Yep. I totally believe that.
But you didn't get involved, Shane. You didn't get involved in any sort of organized anime fandom until.
No, I didn't even meet any other fans of anime at all until college, and that was my first time that I actually met other people who enjoyed Japanese animation or animation at all, really, because most of my friends before then, they might have been a little nerdy, but they weren't like, not interested in the same thing.
You had to work really hard to get into Japanese cartoons in the 80s.
Oh,
You had to be...
It was work. And I remember when Star Blazers started airing, I saw a broadcast where someone out in California had brought in his huge collection of Yamato books.
Well, it was August Ragone.
It was August Ragone, yeah. And, the funny thing is I remembered seeing that segment for years, but I didn't remember him. I just remembered all these books, all these mangas. Like, seeing the original, like, Leiji Matsumoto art for the first time and thinking, this is incredible, and I have to find out more about this because that is so much cooler looking than the cartoon. And, I mean, the cartoon's cool looking, but the Matsumoto art is something else.
The cartoon has that cleaned up, sort of slicked out. And Matsumoto is such an idiosyncratic pen line. His brush line is distinctive.
It looked wild. Like, like Derek Wildstar just looked... First of all, he looked younger, but he also looked like a little crazier. Like, he looked kind of unhinged in his artwork.
Yeah. Yes, definitely. That's Matsumoto.
Yeah.
But actually, that's how Shane and I met. We were both in an anime fan.
It was more for artists.
Well, it was an amateur press association that was for artists that were cartoonists that were working in the anime manga style. And we were both in that, and I gave her a call one day and said, "Hey, how's it going?" And that was the start of it all.
That was a long time ago.
Wow.
A while back.
Wow, so animation brought you together. Anime brought you together. Huh,
we're the one success story.
The only.
We're it.
All other fan couples are doomed.
Okay, I can definitely see that.
I don't think so.
And you managed to Shane, you managed to convince him to come up to Canada. How did you corrupt this good American boy and turn him into a Canadian?
Have you been to America lately?
Well, okay, lately, yeah, but it sounds like he's been here for a while.
I'm kidding, actually. It was really a matter of immigration is easier here.
Well, I had lived my whole life in Atlanta.
Right. I'd lived in both the United States and Canada, so, it didn't really matter to me. But, yeah, Dave had only really lived in Georgia.
I was like, it is time, time to go somewhere else.
And it is just way easier to move to Canada than to the U.S.
Yeah, I mean, even back then, it wasn't easy.
It's tougher, yeah.
And I wouldn't even think to attempt it right now.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we're practically having to put up barricades at the borders to keep people from coming up at this point.
Well, it was interesting. We drove down to Rochester last week, and they were like, "Hey, what's going on? Come on in." They didn't care.
Oh, yeah. No, actually, yeah, it was a very pleasant, the people are as pleasant as they ever were.
Yeah.
I mean, things get weird, but, the people are the same.
Yeah, I don't think they care about Canadians.
No.
Not really, no. Overall, Americans are awesome. Anyway, so Dave, did you end up starting the local Georgia Anime Club then?
I did. I this was back when I was in high school. I was going to, following my brother was a little older. We started going to comic book conventions, and I was sort of tagging along. And he went to a couple of local, like the SCA was having meetings, the Doctor Who Club was having meetings, and I was tagging along. And I was like, does anyone in this room like Japanese cartoons as much as I do? Hello, raise your hand, And I got together with a couple of guys who were older than I was, and we started. There was a national anime club called the CFO, the Cartoon Fantasy Organization. This is how bad it was. You had to join a club called the Cartoon Fantasy Organization to get anime. So anyway, we started a local chapter of the CFO in Atlanta, and we did that till 1988,
At least
87,
they didn't
88.
name themselves after spaceships. Like
We did not.
Star Trek clubs.
We did not name ourselves after spaceships like some other anime clubs that I was also a member of. But anyway, we started that club, and then we started another club called Anime X in 1988, and that lasted until the year 2000, actually. And then in 1995 was our first AWA, and that was a lot of the same sort of people. That's still going.
Wow.
So,
That's fantastic. So how many people did you have coming out, like at your peak?
what, for the club?
Yeah, for the club, yeah.
Oh, I don't believe we ever got more than 40, 50 people showing up at any one time. We never had huge rooms.
I remember going to a few, and it seemed like they filled the library.
Yeah, it was like library meeting rooms for the anime clubs. But the convention,
50 is good.
yeah, it's not bad. It's like some of the college, some of the university clubs will get hundreds of people. But you kind of got a captive audience. You've got an auditorium you can use, that kind of thing. But AWA right now does, I think we did 23,000 people last year.
Wow.
Attendance-wise. It's one of the top 10 anime conventions in the country.
Attendance seems to be going up for most.
Attendance
anime
always goes up, and every year I'm like, there is no way we're going to do more people than this. This has got to be the peak. And every year it tops itself. So I quit predicting. I don't make predictions.
Right. So why do you think it keeps going up? What's actually driving the numbers?
Part of it is because, well, Sailor Moon and Pokemon hit America like a bomb. And also Canada in terms of Sailor Moon. Sailor Moon is ridiculously popular in Canada.
Yes, it was.
It's just it's still a thing, you know? And I think that attracted a bunch of people into anime that were not previously been like, well, this Robotech thing, or it was this strictly male sort of role-playing game, sci-fi nerd kind of thing. And you bring in a Pokemon, which is going to get younger people, and Sailor Moon, which is going to get, you know, girls and women into the fandom. Suddenly you've opened it up to a whole new group of people who are going to grow up with it, who are going to stay with it.
well, especially Pokemon, because the kids who played the first Pokemon games, like, they're still playing Pokemon games. Like, they're
true.
You know, they might not keep up with the TV show, but they're still making a TV show.
I think video games, in and of itself, became much more of a popular culture. It became part of youth culture.
I think just nerd culture in general became really huge.
It's ridiculous. It's like if I had known when I was a teenager that everything I liked as a 12, that I got mocked for liking as a 12-year-old was suddenly going to be the most important thing in the world to everybody, I would not have believed you. I just wouldn't have believed you.
Yeah, I can see that. I have to wonder, though, this is a phenomenon I've been noticing. I've seen this mostly online and such, but I know with a lot of cosplayers come to, of course, anime conventions. That's become a huge part of it.
Yeah.
But one of the things I've noticed about them is that I've seen a lot of interviews where they ask them, you know, like, so you're cosplaying as, like, Batgirl or something. Like, do you read Batgirl comics? No. Okay.
Oh, well...
Yeah, and you see a lot of that where the cosplayers, like, they cosplay as these characters, but they've never actually read the comics or watched the show or anything like that.
There's a friend of mine who's an artist, and she's been doing artwork of Spider-Gwen, which is
I've heard of
Gwen Stacy as Spider-Girl, or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
They brought
Gwen Stacy became Spider-Man instead of Peter Parker,
I guess that's what happened, and I'm asking her, so what is the story with Spider-Gwen? And she's like, I don't know.
Well, especially like if you're an artist and you're selling art in Artist Alley,
exactly.
You have to draw what people want. So.
I think part of it is that certainly with a character like Batgirl, you don't need to have name your number one favorite Batgirl story. I defy you to name your number one. There ain't
Supergirl,
one.
Supergirl make Batman and Superman
That's right.
have a flat tire.
That's not really them though.
Well, I don't know. I just saw the cover. I haven't read the comic
Oh,
yet.
well, I spoiled it.
That comic happens to be lying around right now. So
yeah, we've got. There's a '60s comic where the Batgirl Supergirl plot, where they take away Batman and Superman's powers, and Batman and Superman are like bums, and they're having to pump up the flat tire in the Batmobile, and Supergirl and Batgirl are like, ha, our plan worked.
Okay, that sounds like a stupid comic.
Yeah, I think it's on the rotation.
The
Yeah.
problem with those '60s DC superhero comics is that there's so many of them that are really funny. That
Those are the best.
yeah, they are really
Seriously,
very easy.
Seriously, the comics, I've made fun of a lot of Lois Lane comics, but those Lois Lane comics by Kurt Schaffenberger are some of the finest comic books, certainly in the Silver Age.
I mean, it's a good example of something that, it's stupid, but it's also a really good comic.
That guy is first off, he's a tremendous draftsman.
He's a fantastic artist.
He's a really good artist. And the stories are like, here's Lois Lane going out and doing stuff, and maybe Superman's in it, maybe he's not.
Yeah, it's just about Lois Lane.
And she's out there doing it for herself, Which
she's a strong, independent woman.
She's a strong, independent woman who just wants to hook Superman into get married. Who wouldn't want that? Obsessed with marriage, like all women. No, where was I going with this? I was talking about Batgirl, and that Batgirl is such a great character in and of herself.
Yeah, she's iconic.
She's iconic.
Like, people know what she looks like.
People, hey, it's Batgirl, which is that's the mark of a good character. I mean, like, you look at Richie Rich, right? You don't need to know anything about Richie Rich to know, hey, it's Richie Rich or Astro Boy. Yeah. Or, hell, Captain Harlock.
True.
I mean, look at
Harlock's
Captain.
Just awesome.
In fact, I highly recommend people not actually learn the stories behind Captain Harlock, because the story you make in your head is going to be so much cooler than what Captain Harlock actually does. And that's not actually true, because Captain Harlock is pretty awesome stuff.
It depends which version, because there's so many versions of Harlock.
Well, exactly, right?
He lets people think that he's carrying a sword, but it's really a gun, and then he shoots.
I love that. Like, everybody is surprised. You shot me! It's like, are you the last guy in outer space that doesn't know this is actually a gun?
Do you see the trigger? There is a trigger on this.
What? I didn't know you were going to shoot me. That hurt, man.
That's a really impractical fencing foil.
Yeah.
He's got a spaceship with a switchblade on the front of it. I mean, beat that, right? Come on.
That's true.
Well, the wave motion gun.
Yeah, the wave motion gun, right? I mean, come on, beat that.
Yep. Yeah, that's true.
I feel like that, like the Yamato is itself an iconic character, right? But what I'm trying to say about like cosplay is, you're enjoying wearing a costume.
Well, you like how it.
You like how it looks.
Yeah.
Looks. Right.
Not going to be one of those guys that's you don't know who Power Girl is, so you shouldn't be dressing up like Power Girl.
I question any man, or at least any heterosexual man, I should say, who doesn't want women dressing up as Power Girl.
Who's going to sit there and complain about that?
Why would you?
That's true.
Want that?
Yeah, oh my, at the bottom of that is, I don't want girls in my private little club.
Well,
I don't want girls in my dude clubhouse.
The horses long ago left that bar.
And this is what I was getting with Sailor Moon, is that when they started publishing Sailor Moon comics, that led manga to be a thing in America, which got girls reading comics again, which was not a thing that was happening.
Yeah, that definitely brought girls into comic stores, because that wasn't happening.
That was not happening.
And I want to say, actually, too, I think the Marvel movies have brought a lot of girls into reading comics, because they want to find out more about the characters in the movies, who are,
You would think that, but from what I know, Marvel's sales haven't been affected by the movies at all.
Yeah. They've been
like
kind of flat. Well, I think it gets girls in the stores, and then girls buy other things.
Well, but then they say, they read like a couple of the comics and go, oh. And it's like, oh, well, maybe there's a manga here.
Captain America is a Nazi now? I don't think I'm going to read it.
Yeah.
They are, and I never got into reading Marvel for the very reason that I can't figure out what's going on. You pick up an issue of a Marvel comic, and it's like just mountains of text with little notes that say, see last ish, or see issue 123 of
Smile
Avengers.
And Stand.
Yeah, it's like, so I have to cross-reference what I've just bought with another completely different title that was published 2 months ago, and there is no way I'm doing that. I'm just going to buy the Flash.
Yep. I think that's probably what's more or less killed Marvel Comics is their constant, every 2 or 3 months they have to have a crossover or you have to buy 5 other comics to understand the story that you're reading. It's just, no wonder they're dying.
See, and I feel like this is the real stupidity in comics, but it's hard to make fun of that in, 1,500 words on a Thursday morning, It's hard to boil that down.
Yeah, but you guys did.
Well, yeah.
Well, we'd have to do it visually.
Yeah. It's hard to do it visually.
Well, there's the two of the stupid comics reviews you guys did that really stick, I think, are the one that you did on when stupid comics ruled the world.
Yeah. Yeah, I was happy to do that.
Yeah, it talked about this, and the other one that I think sticks because it really explains a lot of the '80s was when you did the how to publish comics the Solson way.
Oh God,
that was pretty special. Yeah.
Oh, that guy.
Yeah.
Oh man, you know what he's doing now, right? Gary Solson or Gary Brodsky. He is doing these pickup artist videos.
That's right. Yeah.
Is he?
He's a total sleazebag. Yeah.
Well, it's just
yeah.
whatever he can make money.
Get rich quick.
Yeah.
Increase your word power, whatever. What a terrible guy. He took so much money from people.
And remember, we had those other comics that we did that actually has a little story about how they got scammed by
the
Solson.
Protectors, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
They have a little text piece running on the top of each page telling the story of how they published the comic and how they gave it to Solson to publish. And Solson took the comic, printed it, distributed it, sold it, and kept all the money. And the Protectors are like, wait a minute. Okay, they were stupid, but they're like 19-year-olds trying to publish their own comic.
I don't know how carefully they read the contracts.
I don't believe they did.
But I mean, he was going after people like that.
Oh yeah. He was a vulture.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like Vanity
You may
Press.
have to take this part out because it'll probably get us all sued.
I welcome that guy. Bring it on, dude. Oh, I'll do a Kickstarter to pay our legal fees. We'll get $1 million zillion. Everybody.
We're up in Canada. You'll be fine.
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah.
That's another benefit of living in Canada. We can say whatever we want.
Yes, I are a Canadian lawyer, so it doesn't work. It doesn't work. It's not worth it.
No, I think that certainly that Gary Brodsky, the Solson was just this. It boiled down the black and white boom in a nutshell.
Yeah.
I mean, he was basically saying it doesn't matter what like text and art is ancillary. Just get it. Put something stupid on the cover.
Comic stores will buy a first issue of anything, and they'll buy a lot of copies of a first issue of anything because they don't know what the next Ninja Turtles would be, or they didn't back then.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so they were just buying.
Oh, we did. I did like a terrible. I was part of a crew of people in high school. We did a terrible black and white independent comic, and actually got it. Like we cajoled some quick printer to print 100 copies of it, and we actually got it into some comic stores. And we made $30 whole, I think. And it was just the worst comics in the world. But, it's in print, right? You're like, oh, we got our comic in print. And that's all you really care about at that age.
Yeah.
It's getting your comic in print. Maybe I should make fun of that just to be fair.
Yeah, you could.
Actually, one of the guys involved with that comic that I was involved with was named Randy Queen. And he went on to do sort of a bad girl comic called Dark Child, I think.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
And he's actually, he was always the best artist of the bunch. And he was like, yep, I'm going to draw comics. And that's what he did.
Okay.
And, good for him. I don't know what happens in that comic. I assume it involves boobs. But there you go, dude. More power to you.
Wow. Because that's funny, too, because that kind of attitude from the black and white boom surfaced again by the mid-'90s, I think.
Yeah,
certainly with Image. Yeah,
it was not. It was less of a self-publishing boom and more of an Image. This sort of everything had to be glossy, and we'll put multiple covers out, and everyone will have to buy multiple issues of it. And I knew people who did do that, who got suckered into that, and they were really angry when they realized that they had wasted their money. Thinking that these were collectible.
Oh, God.
And it's the same deal of people thinking, oh, this is going to be worth a lot of money because, Ninja Turtles was worth a lot of money, or in the 90s it was, I guess,
Spawn was worth a lot of money.
And it's like, well, you can only do that if you don't know that it's going to be worth a lot. That's why it's valuable.
I think it's scarcity, yeah.
Yeah, scarcity has a lot to do with it.
I mean, that's the thing about 40s comics is that most of them were pulped. Most of them were thrown away.
Yeah, I
they
mean,
were
the
disposable.
reason my father made the decision as an adult to buy the comics he read as a kid is because his mom threw them out when he was a kid, which, everyone's parents did that.
Yep.
Because why would you keep it? It's trash. He read it, so...
Parents are cruel.
Yeah, well...
I want to say yes, but at the same time, a lot of those comics were actual repulsive nonsense.
They are trash.
There is that.
They are trash.
Some of them were literal trash.
Like you watch the TV show Hoarders, and I think the one thing we didn't see on that show was a comic book hoarder.
Well, you can't really hoard comics.
Oh, you can.
But, I mean, you put them in a box. If you go to the trouble of putting it in a box,
that's true.
It's not really hoarding.
The modern comic book collector,
it's on the floor collecting maggots. You have
what I love about
you can't
comic
walk
books
because of all the Ford Fairlane comics on your floor.
You'll slip and fall and you hit your head. No, it's really like we've all been trained to, like, you have to put it in a bag, you got to put it aboard, you got to put it in a box, you've got to put it numerically. We've all been, like, trained to become these obsessive compulsive people. It's fascinating, right?
I think I actually am a little.
Well, I think I am too. I think I was too. But maybe it just attracts those kinds of people.
Oh, it probably does. I think so.
And you can see this in the stores. Like, we have to have a checklist of every comic Iron Man is in, right? It's weird, obsessed. And it's really derailed comics in America, because the rest of the world, comic books are these disposable entertainment items. And sometimes you get characters that last, and sometimes you just like, yep, here's a gigantic pile of weekly manga, and we're going to turn it into toilet paper now, because it's a publication. It's like the newspaper. You read it and you get rid of it.
Yeah, most other places too have the advantage that they'll do proper collections, like Japan does it.
Exactly.
Europe does
Yeah.
it. So you don't run into that problem of having to track down issue 105 to find out who the hell's the guy in the tie, because it's all readily available.
And that's actually what I believe is the reason that culture, the artistic culture of comics itself, is higher in Europe and Japan, is that artists have the opportunity to see work spanning generations. Like, you can go to the store and buy comics from the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s. And here it's like, well, you might get a collection here, a collection there. And then it's all this tremendous work. Unless you worked for EC Comics, those have been reprinted over and over again. Yeah. Those are still in print. But everything else, like, unless your name is Carl Barks or Jack Kirby, you're not going to get it. Because things are much different now.
I think even with Jack Kirby, I don't know that you're going to get
There's
everything.
a lot of Kirby's work that you can't get.
They do a lot of picking and choosing.
Or Dan DeCarlo, right? It's like only just now you're able to get a good collection of Dan DeCarlo's work. Very recently.
Yeah. Otherwise, you could just collect the digest.
Yeah.
It's some of those guys, too, like Kirby and DeCarlo did it's hard to believe, like, they worked back in, like, the 40s. They've been doing comics forever, and they worked for companies doing books that are just gone.
Yeah. Yeah, like you can't get the artwork, you can't get the stats, the plates are gone. You might, you'd have to, if you want to reprint it, you've got to shoot from the actual printed comic.
Yeah.
Which is a pain, because we do that every week.
It's better than nothing.
Yeah, it's better than nothing. I kind of like it. I kind of like the reprints where they actually they shoot from the actual printed comic, so you get, the grain of the paper and the dot screen and everything. I actually like that better than where they shoot from the line art.
Yeah. I don't mind that, but you're very conscious when you're reading, like, original line art. You're conscious that,
I want one or the other. I want, like, either you shoot from the original art and I can see, like, the whiteout and where they scraped over or they pasted up. I love that. Oh, man.
Yeah, because there's some of the other, when you go to, say, like, the Silver Age, there was a lot of guys that were popular that I've seen reprints nowadays that they did in black and white that look a whole lot better. Like, DC had a bunch of guys.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. That's
like Gil Kane, right?
Well, yeah, Gil Kane was one. There was the guy who did a bunch of the earliest Teen Titans. I can't remember his name. Nick Kadry.
Yeah. Ramona Fradon.
Yeah. And when they colored it, not because the colors sucked, but because of the reproduction.
Oh, the printing was terrible, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But you see them in black and white, and you're like, these guys were brilliant.
Oh, you look at a Charlton comic and you think, wow, I wonder what this looked like before they ran it through their cereal box press.
Probably not that much better.
Well, it's true.
Maybe for the Steve Ditko comics.
I feel like when we talk about stupid comics, if it has the words Charlton on the cover, it's probably going to be a stupid comic.
Dave has actually kind of gotten on my case for buying Charlton Romance because they're terrible. They're the worst.
They're uniformly terrible.
They are really terrible, and they're really like I do make fun of them a lot on Stupid Comics because it's super easy.
Well, they had that one story about the boss wants the girl to lose weight, and that was just like reprehensible. That was hateful.
Right. It was hateful, and it was also. This is just one lawsuit. It's just one big lawsuit in the making. And then the worst part, the cherry on that particular cake, I bought a DC Romance comic, and I realized that the Charlton comic had just swiped it panel for panel, but the story wasn't as bad. The story in the DC comic was not nearly as hateful as the one in the Charlton comic. So they rewrote it, but they just swiped like half the panels.
Mm-hmm. Oh, right.
That was fascinating finding that too. That was tremendous.
It's
You guys are even sleazier than I thought you were, Charlton. Thank you.
How could we make this story
You
even
have
worse?
lowered the bar. But honestly, I feel like having looked at so many bad comics, it kind of makes me, first off, appreciate the good comics more. But it makes me appreciate how much work went into making even the worst comic.
Yeah.
Like, just so much labor. And, drawing our own comics, I think, certainly is like, oh, yeah, so we do have to tell a story here. And maybe that comic I was making fun of, I understand what they were up against now,
Yeah,
Sorry, I was just going to say, so does that make you reluctant sometimes? Do you look at a comic and go, this is not very good, but at the same time, someone really put their heart and soul into this?
Yes.
You feel guilty?
Definitely. There are comics that I will not make fun of.
a lot of the 80s comics we do kind of feel like the self-published comics.
I think this week, actually, I think that artist was like 14.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, if she wasn't 14, she was doing a very good impression of a 14-year-old girl drawing comics because it was very Lisa Frankish.
It's a lot of unicorns and
original My Little Pony.
Yeah, it's special. But at the same time, it came out, people spent money on it. Comic book stores paid money to put it on their rack.
A lot of them are very earnest. And you do feel a little bad. And I try to go easy on the art. I actually do go easy on the art a lot because I know art is really hard.
Yeah.
Whereas a bad story is just like, why would you even...
I think to make fun of the art, it has to be some amazing, like, anatomy fail.
Yeah.
Or like a perspective that is just, like, does not work at all.
Yeah, like, why would you print this? Yeah.
I think one of the, like that, one of those Archie superhero comics, there's a scene where the hero is... I'm not sure what he's doing. I think he's squatting, and they just, like, cut off half of his legs or something. It's really, I don't know.
I think it's an anchor.
It's disturbing. Yeah. And those guys are all like, especially mid-60s artists, they're all like these alcoholic, page rate, couldn't care less. They couldn't care.
Or like,
there was a paycheck.
A 90s comic that isn't an Image comic, but it's trying to be an Image comic that I think we did not too long ago that has some astoundingly bad... There were a couple of these. Like, they have really fancy 90s era computer coloring and, all the special effects that your little Mac could possibly offer. But the actual artwork was terrible.
Yeah, the actual line art is like, we're just not going to draw a building
I have
here.
never seen a human.
I don't know what a hand looks like. I can't look in the mirror and draw a hand.
Well, hands are hard, but these are people who I honestly don't think they've ever seen a child.
Yeah.
Ouch.
Wow.
And I really, it's
pretty bad.
I understand deadlines are a thing and stuff, but these people are so enraptured of the idea of like, I'm going to publish my own comic. They're just so in love with that idea that the execution is almost secondary.
Yeah.
Oh no, I'm going to have my own comic.
Yep, and it's going to be awesome.
It will be awesome. And then they, like, I can pay to print this comic, or I can go to college. Well, I guess I'm going to pay to print this comic.
That's like a college.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is like a college. It's a
School of hard knocks.
Hard knocks.
Yeah, you do wonder how many people blew their life savings back in like the 80s and 90s during those comic booms.
I feel bad.
Just trying to do that.
I feel bad for the retailers too, because those are all non-returnable.
Yeah.
Like every one of those comics, they spent money on. Every comic you see in a 25-cent bin, they bought at, I don't want to say full retail, but whatever wholesale discount they were getting, So they're taking a loss on every one of those comics. And this is why so many comic book stores go out of business.
Yeah.
Yeah, except for in London, Ontario, where they live forever with massive piles of old comics everywhere.
Where?
Oh yeah, we're like the comic hoarders of Ontario.
Huh.
No, seriously, if you want, I'm in London, so if you want old comics, come to London. Our comic stores actually have to rent out like other locations to store all the comics they have.
I believe we have.
I think the only I know we've been to Speed City Records in London a couple of times, but I don't believe I know we've hit a couple of thrift stores downtown London.
Yeah, I don't know that we've ever tried the comic books.
Yeah, I think they're like we would always be in London, and it would always be like 5:00 on a Saturday, so everything's closed.
Yeah.
We'll have to make a special trip.
Yeah. Like look out, here we come.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, check out the Comic Book Collector, Heroes, which is downtown LA Mood. Although LA Mood's kind of shifted to become a little more of a game store over the years, but Heroes has a massive number of comics. They really do. It's quite impressive.
What are their prices like?
I haven't been there for a while, so I can't really tell you. Once upon a time they were okay, but I haven't been there for a bit. So I can't really tell you.
They'll see us coming a mile.
They'll see us coming. That's a nice plug for them, right?
Yep. Just go in and ask for the oldest and strangest comics they've got and see what happens.
We will do that. Sometimes we'll be in a store and they'll be like, "So, what are you looking for?" And we're like, "What is the stupidest comics? Like, where's the box of stuff you can't sell?"
Well, and then they'll just pull out, "Oh, did you know Archie was a zombie?"
Yeah.
It's true, actually. Yeah, and we've had like that dealer was like, "I can't stand Archie comics myself, but."
Right.
Like, what's your problem, man? Jeez.
Well, that goes back to the old days, though, that Archie's not a real comic book.
Exactly. And we heard this about manga. We heard this about Japanese cartoons, right?
Yeah.
It's like, I hate that stuff, And now the kids love it, right? And like, what's I don't think the comic book show's not getting 20,000 people,
No, that's for sure.
That's very true. That's why they have to combine with the anime shows now. It has to be Comic Expo, which is really mostly an anime convention.
That's right.
And whatever else. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's North America's comic industry for the past while was basically the Japanese comic industry.
They were working really hard. Yeah. I mean, there was a manga boom.
Manga definitely saved a lot of comic book stores, I think.
And here's the deal. The deal is that there's just as much, if not more, stupid manga than there is, stupid American comics.
Way more. Yeah.
Just from sheer weight of it. But we haven't, we don't have the resources to really track that stuff down and dig it out. And that's always something that's on our radar.
It's less obvious. I feel like the really stupid manga is less obvious. Like, you can pick up a stupid comic and just look at the cover sometimes and go, oh, yeah, this is something worth checking out. But with manga, partly because if it's brought over here in the first place, obviously there's got to be someone behind it.
Yeah.
I'm sure that there's a lot of crazy manga that never gets imported. Because, why would they? The publisher is probably like, why in God's name did we publish this in the first place?
I feel like there's a lot of Japanese manga that the Japanese don't want exported.
Yeah.
They're like, this is really not for you.
Yeah.
Well, I think that what we're interested in is the ones where they're like, this is really not for anyone. And I'm not sure why we made this to begin with.
Not sure why.
Without, being fluent in Japanese and actually living in Japan where you can, check it out all the time.
There's a language barrier.
Yeah.
But the best part about buying that sort of stuff in Japan is the look they give you at the cash register. And they're like, why are you buying this?
I think we got that more with visual. He bought we were in Tokyo and he bought a Sukat VHS, which is
it was a DVD set.
Oh, that's right. It was DVD. And it's this dumb cartoon mascot character. And he's goes to the clerk and the clerk looks at him and goes, this is Japanese. And we're like, no, I didn't know that, Mr. Japanese man selling video in Tokyo.
Sue Cat is this show. It's about an idol singer girl who's a cat, and she becomes an idol singer.
Okay.
Yeah, she loses her memory.
She's like like a mascot?
She was a mascot character, yeah. And she loses, so they wrote a story to go behind this mascot character. And she loses her memory. She's like, well, I'll become a star, and that way my relatives will see me on TV, and they'll find me, and I'll find out who I am. And it was made by this studio called NAC. And NAC is the worst Japanese animation studio, pretty much hands down. They kind of suck.
Mm-hmm. They're the Charlton of anime.
They are the Charlton of anime. You can say that. They did another show called Charge Man Ken, which is widely regarded to be the worst Japanese cartoon of all time. It's a really terrible super kid science fiction cartoon. And we went to a bar in Tokyo called Sonic 44, which is like an otaku bar. And we walk in the door, and Charge Man Ken is on the TV in the bar.
Because they know how stupid it
Because
is.
they know exactly how stupid Charge Man Ken is. It's called Bonkura. Bonkura.
Right.
That's what they call it. Like, you know, so stupid, it's so bad it's good, you know?
And that's a new concept for the Japanese,
Yeah,
too.
yeah. They didn't really get irony.
They're this Charge Man Ken.
Yeah.
Like made them, that's what irony is. Oh, that's camp.
Okay.
Oh.
So we're in the bar, and the guys, we're like, holy shit, it's Charge Man Ken. And the proprietor is like, you know Charge Man Ken? We're like, the whole world knows of Charge Man Ken. Actually, Discotheque is going to be putting that out on DVD this year, by the way. So you will be able to watch Charge Man Ken legally in the privacy of your own home.
Oh, okay. That's good.
I highly recommend it.
See, that's kind of weird, because I think for the nerdly arts, it seems that we had this thing in the 60s that the Japanese have always had, never lose, where they can straddle that line between it's awesome and it's terrible at the same time.
They have this straight-faced
It's because
ability.
of the lack of irony, I think.
Well,
they're not trying to be funny. It's like, no, this is really... And you see that a lot with the more melodramatic shoujo manga. Like, it's very, very straightforward. And there's no irony involved. They're not trying to be funny or
you have to take it at face value.
There's no winking or smirking. It's all,
Yep.
See, and this is what I really dislike about a lot of American media, especially like a lot of nerd stuff, is that it is so insufferably winky and
it's very self-aware.
Pandering, like, look what I did here. You saw what I did, right? Pardon me.
Yep.
And that's really tedious. It's tiresome. I would much rather watch something that might be cheesy, but it embraces its what it's doing wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, that's actually an idea that's come up in a lot of the interviews we've done. That a lot of people really do kind of value like the old Silver Age silly comics or the old like 50s and 60s B movies, because they're not necessarily good, but they're surprising. You're going to see things you've never seen before, for good or ill.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of media these days, especially, the environment we're in right now is that most of our media is run by like 3 or 4 giant corporations.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, everything we're going to see is either Warner Brothers or Disney.
Yeah.
You know, like you go see a Star Wars movie, it's Disney. You go see a Marvel Comics movie, it's Disney. You go see a Warner Brothers thing, it's like, well, it's either, you know,
Time Warner,
Turner, multi, whatever, you know. And there's really not a lot of room anymore for these independent, I don't want to say auteur directors, but guys like David Lynch can't get arrested these days, you know.
I think Woody Allen's the only person, and his I think he only keeps getting to make movies because his movies are so cheap.
Yeah, he's super cheap, right?
Yeah.
Like they cost nothing to make.
A guy like Russ Meyer couldn't even, like, they would run him out of town on a rail. You know,
well, he would be on the internet.
He would be making movies on the internet.
He would be making his little cam girl movie pictures on the internet. And I think that's where a lot of people are going to go. But the problem is separating the wheat from the chaff when it comes to the internet.
There's no gatekeeper. There's no distributor going, okay, Faster Pussycat Kill Kill is going to go in the drive-in this week.
Yeah, I mean, the drive-ins, and I love going to the drive-in, but it's, you know, the major motion pictures going in there. They're not filling out, it's not movies specially made.
I feel like a lot of what shaped us, like Shain and I personally, our pop culture sensibility is being able to watch UHF television and see a lot of reruns of 50s and 60s shows and weird monster movies and Japanese cartoons. And then we were able to go to the movie theater and see maybe some weird Roger Corman movie, B pictures and stuff like that. And everything wasn't quite as programmed as it is now. Yeah. I mean, it was programmed, but it was a little looser, I think.
Yeah, it was...
a little less. I mean, because when Reagan came in, they deregulated the broadcast industry. So suddenly, instead of having small UHF stations in every city, each one coming
Super
up,
stations.
Yeah, each one coming up with his own horror host, and each one trying to say, well, which sea captain is going to introduce Gigantor this week? Now it's like it's the UPN network, and every city gets the same stuff.
Yeah.
And that's boring. It's tedious.
I agree. Yeah, we lost a lot of variety when those UHF stations were gone.
I feel like that's how we got the Japanese cartoons we loved, is because these UHF stations needed programming, and where are they going to get programming? It's going to be Japan, right? Of course, now we have
wherever's cheap.
Yeah, wherever's cheap. We get Mexican wrestling movies, and Italian sword and sandal movies, and spaghetti westerns, and weird, freak Doctor Who. That was some weird British thing no one wanted to watch.
Yeah, and we were the last generation to grow up on that stuff, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think we're it.
The funny thing is that when I was a kid, and, I'm sure everyone else, we'd watch reruns of shows that were on before we were born. I remember watching Fit to Beaver. That was like another universe to me, because it was, before I was born. But these days, the reruns, when they show sitcom reruns on TV, it's shows that are actually still running.
Yeah, it'd be like The New Girl.
They stopped showing Office reruns after The Office, before The Office went off the air. It's strange. You see 8 million episodes of The Big Bang Theory, but as soon as that goes off the air, you're not going to see it on TV anymore at all.
What will we do when The Big Bang Theory is gone? I don't know
how.
There's
one station. There's just a local station. I think. I can't remember which one it is, but I just call it the Big Bang Station because that's all. It seems like every time I flip past,
it's all Sheldon all the time.
Probably it's Omni TV, is it?
Probably, yeah. I think I'm thinking of Omni. Yeah.
Yeah, Omni does that where they just pick one or two sitcoms and they just run them to death every evening in between their international programming.
Which, to be fair, that's how I got caught up on The Office. So
yeah, that's true.
Well, yeah.
I will say this about I don't want to say the difference, but when I moved up to Canada, I'm like, okay, what's going to be different about Canada, right? And it seems to me that there's this whole I don't want to say universe, but there's a lot of Canadian popular culture that is just completely ignored. It's like stuff like Forest Rangers, right? It's almost like Canada's kind of embarrassed of its own homegrown stuff. There's some homegrown stuff
Sometimes if I'm up at the right time of day, I'll turn on CHCH and see Littlest Hobo.
Littlest Hobo, yeah, right?
If I'm lucky.
And I am a complete newcomer to this stuff, but I'm like, no, you should be shoving this down everybody's throats.
They should be, yeah.
You're like, no, you're in Canada. This is what you watch.
All Star Lost, all Littlest Hobo, all the time.
And people will be leaving in droves. No,
yeah, exactly.
Not the Star Lost.
No, that's true. But The Littlest Hobo, every Canadian pretty much has grown up watching that at one point or another.
I love that show. That dog is really smart.
I feel like there's this sort of mid-century...
I saw one. I'm pretty sure he was driving a fire engine. Really love that dog.
Now, did they have a close-up of his paws on the steering wheel?
He's leaning out the window, kind of chill.
But that is a show we never the existence of that show is just the United States has no idea that show exists.
The Beachcombers.
I believe it.
Yeah, or the beach or the Beachcombers or Forest Rangers for that matter.
Yep, I could see that. Or the Red Green Show.
We got the Red Green Show in the States.
That was actually pretty popular.
You did get that?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
And we got Kids in the Hall.
Yeah.
Kids in the Hall was a big deal. When I was in college. Like Buffington and everybody's like, oh, Kids in the Hall is on. And we would we're watching Kids in the Hall.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, cool.
Yeah. I mean, we went to the theater when Brain Candy came out. We went to the movie theater in Atlanta, Georgia and watched motherfucking Brain Candy. I don't know if I can cuss on this podcast. You can bleep.
Go ahead. We just occasionally throw in an explicit tag if people cuss, but it's not a big deal.
Mm.
So, Don, did you have any other questions you want to ask?
I think we covered a lot of it. The one thing I wanted to ask about was what's the deal with evil Dr. 11?
What is the deal with evil Dr. 11? Why don't you tell us the deal?
Okay, well, once upon a time, I had 2 cats. This was a different marriage. And never let your ex name your cat is lesson number 1, because he insisted on naming it. We got 2 kittens, and he insisted on naming one the evil Dr. 11. And as it happened, she was pretty crazy looking. She was like part Persian, and she just had this really weird, like, huge eyes.
She was the runt.
Big head. She was the runt of the litter. So she looked kind of weird. So it fit. So, okay, we had 2 cats, Gabby and the evil Dr. 11. And I decided I thought it would be fun. I had a friend who was actually looking into doing daily newspaper strips, and this was at a time when that was not a complete
the dying art.
It wasn't coal mining or buggy whip making. So I was like, I might give that a try. That sounds like a fun thing to try. So I did. I thought it would be fun to make a little comic strip about my 2 cats. And I actually did have I actually really like that strip. I still think it's kind of funny.
I think it's a good strip.
And I leave it up mainly out because the cats passed away a few years ago, and I leave it up mainly as, memorial to them. Yeah, I tried to do a newspaper strip once, and nobody bought it, but I still like it. So
I think you could bring that back.
It was one of the first things I learned to ink with a brush with, so the artwork is kind of weird.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
That cat was that was a goofy cat.
Yeah.
The cats were sisters, and they kind of ignored each other, but if one was getting more attention, the other one would show up and go, "Hey, hey."
They were super competitive.
They were really, really jealous of each other.
Huh.
I think I'm a bad parent.
Shain and Dave, thank you very much for coming on the show.
Yeah.
It's been fascinating to hear about Mr. Kitty and your background, and just to talk anime and pop culture with you.
Well, thanks for letting me ramble on. We went.
We both enjoy rambling about silly nonsense.
We'll be back next week. We'll ramble some more.
Okay, well, you are always welcome back on the show if you want to come back on.
We're gonna have to come. We're gonna have to visit London and do some comic book shopping.
Yeah, we will definitely do that.
Yeah, thanks.
Definitely.
Thanks for having us.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks for listening to the show. If you'd like to hear more or join the conversation, come visit us at obeythedna.com. You can also find us on iTunes or whatever fine podcast site forgot to lock their back door. So until next time, remember that to master the nerdly arts takes time, practice, and enough Coca-Cola to drop a rhino. See ya! Come on over and join the conversation at obeythedna.com, where you will find show notes and more.